Imagine armor so perfectly engineered that a warrior could fight for 12 hours straight in desert heat without collapsing. Yet modern metallurgists still can't fully replicate its construction. Now picture another suit so psychologically terrifying that enemies would flee at its mere sight, carved with symbols meant to steal the souls of the fallen. These weren't costumes. They were technological marvels that decided the fate of empires. But the world of ancient armor holds far more than the simple metal shells we imagine from Hollywood films. Buried in forgotten armories and excavated from royal tombs, archaeologists have uncovered full-body protective systems so sophisticated they blur the line between ancient craftsmanship and modern engineering. Some were flexible enough to allow a warrior to perform acrobatic maneuvers. Others were so heavy they required pulleys to mount the wearer. One was discovered with Damascus steel so sharp it could still cut paper after lying buried for 800 years. These armor sets are steeped in mystery, each one carved into history by the mighty empires that forged them. From the steppes of Central Asia to the rice fields of feudal Japan, from the deserts of Persia to the forests of medieval Europe, warriors encased themselves in metal, leather, and bone, transforming into nearly invincible fighting machines. Today, we'll uncover 9 of the most extraordinary full-body armor sets ever created, each one more ingenious than the last. And we begin with a civilization that most people have never even heard of. Armor 1. Cataphract armor of the Parthian Empire. The year is 53 BC. Roman legions, the most feared military force in the known world, march confidently into the desert plains of Kahi, in what is now southeastern Turkey. They've conquered Gaul. They've crushed rebellion after rebellion. Their general, Crassus, one of Rome's richest men, expects an easy victory against the Parthian Empire. Then, from the shimmering heat of the desert horizon, they appear. Thousands of horsemen, but not like any cavalry Rome has ever faced. These warriors and their horses are completely covered in scales of bronze and iron that catch the sunlight like 1,000 mirrors. The Romans can't see faces, can't see flesh. Just metal. Moving metal. The legionaries freeze. What are they looking at? This is cataphract armor, and it's about to shatter Rome's sense of invincibility. But here's what makes this armor truly revolutionary. It wasn't just the rider who was armored. The horse wore its own complete suit of scale armor, turning mount and warrior into a single, unstoppable battering ram of flesh and metal. The Parthians had created the world's first tanks, 1,500 years before tanks existed. Now, you might be thinking, wouldn't all that weight slow them down? Here's the genius part. The armor was made of thousands of small overlapping scales, each about the size of a playing card, attached to a leather backing with bronze wire. This gave it flexibility. A cataphract could swing a lance, draw a bow, even twist in the saddle to fire backward while retreating. The scales moved like fish skin, rigid enough to stop swords but flexible enough to flow with the body's motion. But the real secret wasn't just in the scales themselves. It was in the psychological impact. Imagine being a Roman soldier, trained to fight men you could see, whose faces betrayed fear or determination. Now imagine facing something that looked more like a metal demon than a human being. The cataphracts didn't just fight battles. They won them before swords even clashed, because they broke the enemy's will. At Kahi, 20,000 Roman soldiers died. Crassus was executed, and the cataphract armor became the blueprint for heavy cavalry for the next 1,000 years. But here's the mystery that still haunts historians. How did the Parthians keep their warriors from overheating in the desert sun while wearing 70 pounds of bronze? Some scholars believe they used a sophisticated system of padded undergarments soaked in water before battle. Others think the gaps between scales created airflow channels. The truth is, we still don't fully understand the engineering. And speaking of engineering mysteries, the next armor on our list contains a metal that shouldn't even exist with ancient technology. Armor 2. Samurai Oyoroi. Feudal Japan, 12th century. A samurai named Minamoto no Tamitomo stands on a battlefield, arrows raining down around him. One strikes his chest plate with a sound like a bell. The arrow shatters. Another hits his shoulder. The iron scales barely dent. But here's what's extraordinary. Tamitomo can still move with the grace of a dancer. He can kneel. He can run. He can even swim across a river without drowning. This is Yoroi, great armor, and it represents perhaps the most sophisticated approach to full body protection ever conceived. Where Western knights sacrificed mobility for protection, Japanese armorists asked, why not have both? The answer lay in how the armor was constructed. Instead of solid plates, Yoroi used hundreds of small iron or leather scales called kazane, each about the size of a domino, laced together with silk or leather cords in geometric patterns. The result was a suit that could flex and bend at dozens of articulation points while still providing protection equivalent to European plate armor. It was like wearing a protective fence that moved with your body. But here's where it gets fascinating. The lacing pattern itself was part of the defensive system. Different schools of armor making used different lacing techniques. Some created overlapping patterns that made it nearly impossible for arrows to penetrate, while others prioritized flexibility for horseback archery. A master armor could look at the lacing and tell you which clan, which region, sometimes even which specific craftsman created the armor. And then there's the helmet, the kabuto. This wasn't just protection for the head. It was psychological warfare. Many kabuto featured demonic masks, oni-faced mempo that covered the lower face with snarling demons, fanged beasts, or ancestral spirits. When a samurai charged, his opponent didn't see a man. He saw a demon made flesh. But here's the detail that makes you realize how advanced this was. The armor was designed to be put on by the wearer alone. European knights needed squires to armor them, a process that could take an hour. A samurai could don full Yoroi in about 15 minutes, without assistance. Each piece interlocked with specific ties and knots that the warrior memorized until the process became muscle memory. Weight? About 55 pounds, distributed so intelligently across the body that samurai could fight for hours without exhaustion. And unlike European armor, it could be repaired in the field. Broken cords could be replaced. Damaged scales could be swapped out. The armor evolved with its wearer. Yet one mystery remains. Some surviving examples of Yoroi contain steel alloys that Japanese metallurgy of the period shouldn't have been able to produce. The metal shows traces of sophisticated carbon control, creating zones of hardness and flexibility within single plates. Modern metallurgists have attempted to recreate these ancient techniques and failed. Whatever the secret was, it died with the armorers who knew it. But if you think samurai armor was sophisticated, wait until you hear about an empire that turned armor making into literal magic. Armor 3, Persian Immortal Armor. Before we continue, I want to ask you for something. If you like these documentaries and want to support me, please consider subscribing. It's free. The Achaemenid Persian Empire, 5th century BC. King Xerxes commands a force called the Immortals, 10,000 elite warriors who got their name from an eerie characteristic. Whenever one fell in battle, he was immediately replaced, making the unit appear immortal, never diminishing. But the armor they wore was just as legendary as their name. Picture this: a warrior in scale armor that shimmers with an almost supernatural quality. Not bronze, not iron, but a combination so perfectly alloyed that Greek historians who encountered them swore the metal must have been blessed by the gods. The armor covered the warrior from neck to knee in overlapping fish scale patterns, each scale individually riveted to a backing of reinforced linen. Here's what made it terrifying. The scales weren't uniform. The Persians had discovered something that European armorists wouldn't figure out for another 1,000 years. Different parts of the body need different types of protection. The chest and back plates used larger, thicker scales made of bronze. The arms used smaller, more flexible scales that allowed full range of motion. The thighs used hardened leather scales that were lighter but still effective against slashing attacks. But the real innovation was underneath. Persian armorists had developed a quilted undergarment called a kanda that was soaked in vinegar and then dried multiple times. This process hardened the fabric to the point where it could stop arrows on its own. The metal scales were actually the second layer of defense. If an arrow penetrated the scales, which was rare, it still had to get through fabric that was essentially ancient Kevlar. And here's the detail that sends chills down your spine. The armor was designed to intimidate as much as protect. Persian immortals wore tall felt hats called tiaras that made them appear 7 feet tall. Their scale armor was often decorated with gold inlay, creating patterns that caught light and made the warrior appear to shimmer like a supernatural being. When 10,000 of these warriors marched in formation, the psychological effect was devastating. Greek historians recorded that Persian immortals could march 20 miles in a day while wearing full armor and carrying supplies. They could fight in desert heat, mountain cold, or marsh humidity without the armor failing. It was so well designed that surviving examples from royal tombs, over 2,500 years old, still show the flexibility of the scale articulation. But here's the mystery that keeps archaeologists awake at night. Several examples of Persian immortal armor have been found with a strange property. The bronze scales show evidence of having been heat-treated at temperatures that shouldn't have been possible with ancient furnace technology. Some scales show a pattern of hardness distribution that suggests something like modern differential heat treatment. How did they do it? Some scholars believe the Persians had access to secret metalworking techniques passed down from earlier civilizations, possibly the Hittites or even the mysterious Mitanni. Others think they discovered a natural chemical process using minerals from specific Persian mountains. The truth is, we simply don't know. The knowledge died with the empire. And speaking of empires with inexplicable technology, the next armor comes from warriors who shouldn't have had the resources to create it at all. Armor 4, Gothic plate armor. Milan, Italy. Late 15th century. In a workshop filled with the sound of hammers on metal, an armorer holds up a breastplate so perfectly polished it works as a mirror. He places it on an anvil and brings down a hammer with full force. The hammer bounces off. The plate doesn't even dent. This is Gothic plate armor, the pinnacle of medieval armor making, and it represents something extraordinary. The moment when armor became so advanced that it actually changed the nature of warfare itself. Forget everything you think you know about knights being slow, clumsy, or unable to move. That's Hollywood myth. Gothic plate armor, when properly fitted, weighed between 45 and 60 pounds, about what modern soldiers carry in combat gear. But here's the crucial difference. The weight was distributed across the entire body through an articulated system of plates that moved with you. A knight in well-fitted Gothic armor could run, jump, climb ladders, mount a horse without assistance, and even do cartwheels. There are historical records of knights performing acrobatics in full armor to demonstrate their agility. The armor didn't restrict movement. It was like wearing a metal exoskeleton that moved with your body. But how? The secret was in the articulation. Every joint, shoulders, elbows, knees, ankles, used a system of overlapping plates called lames that slid over each other as you moved. Think of an armadillo's shell, but made of hardened steel. Each plate was carefully shaped to follow the body's contours, distributing impact force across a wide area while maintaining flexibility. And here's where Gothic armor becomes truly mind-blowing. It was custom-fitted to each individual knight. Master armorists would take dozens of measurements, creating wooden patterns, then forging plates to match the knight's exact body shape. The result was armor that fit like a second skin. No pressure points, no restricted movement. Just protection. But protection from what? Gothic plate armor was designed to be effectively invulnerable to the weapons of its time. Swords? They'd glance off the curved surfaces. Arrows? Unless fired from a longbow at close range, they'd bounce off. Even early firearms struggled against quality plate armor. Tests using period-accurate weapons have shown that well-made Gothic armor could stop most battlefield threats. The breastplate was the masterpiece. Armorists would forge it from a single piece of steel, then shape it to create a bulging surface that deflected blows away from the body. The curve wasn't just for show, it was engineering. When a sword struck the breastplate at an angle, the force would slide off rather than transferring to the knight's body. It's the same principle modern tanks use with sloped armor. But here's the eerie part. Some surviving examples of Gothic armor show evidence of having been proofed, test-fired with early guns to ensure quality. Armorists would shoot their own creations to verify they could stop bullets. You can still see the dents in museum pieces, marks where the armor was shot and held. These weren't defects. They were proof of quality, literally proof marks. Yet one mystery has haunted historians for centuries. How did medieval armorists achieve such high-quality steel? Analysis of surviving Gothic armor shows carbon content and heat treatment that rivals modern steel production. The metal shows almost no impurities. Some pieces demonstrate a phenomenon called work hardening, where the steel became harder through the forging process itself. We have the armor. We can analyze it. But we still can't fully replicate the medieval process. And if Gothic armor seems impossibly advanced, wait until you see what the Byzantines created with a material that shouldn't work as armor at all. Armor 5. Byzantine lamellar armor. Constantinople, heart of the Byzantine Empire, 10th century AD. A soldier called a kataphractos, meaning completely enclosed, prepares for battle. He reaches for his armor, but instead of metal plates, he begins lacing together hundreds of small rectangular plates. The sound is like shuffling cards. In 20 minutes, he's encased in protection that will stop swords, arrows, and lances. This is lamellar armor, and it's one of history's most underrated protective systems. Here's what makes lamellar genius. It's not made from one-piece plates like European armor. It's not even made from scales sewn to backing like cataphract armor. Instead, lamella consists of individual rectangular plates, lamellae, that are laced together edge to edge and row by row using leather or silk cords. Each plate overlaps the one below it, creating a surface like roof shingles made of metal. Why does this matter? Because lamella could be constructed from almost anything. Hardened leather, bronze, iron, steel, even bone or horn. Byzantine armors would mix materials within a single suit, using steel for vital areas and leather for areas needing flexibility. The result was customizable protection that could be adapted to different combat roles, climates, and budgets. But the real brilliance was in the maintenance. European plate armor, if badly damaged in battle, required a skilled armor to repair. Lamella? You could fix it in your tent with spare plates and cord. A damaged plate could be unthreaded and replaced in minutes. This made Byzantine lamella ideal for long campaigns where professional armor repair wasn't available. And here's the fascinating psychological element. Lamella looked more primitive than solid plate armor. Byzantine soldiers understood this. When fighting opponents who judged threats by appearance, they appeared less formidable than they actually were. Then they'd win the battle, and their enemies would be left wondering how these inferior soldiers in outdated armor had crushed them. The Byzantines took lamella to its logical extreme. A full Byzantine cataphractos suit included lamella armor for the torso, arms, and legs, a separate lamella skirt for hip protection, lamella vambraces for the forearms, and even lamella horse armor. The warrior and mount became a single armored unit, just like the earlier Persian cataphracts, but with the added advantage of field-repairable components. Tests with reconstructed Byzantine lamella have revealed something unexpected. The laced construction actually provides better protection against certain attacks than solid plate. When a weapon strikes lamella, the individual plates can shift slightly, distributing impact force across multiple lamellae rather than transmitting it to a single point. It's almost like modern reactive armor on tanks, where the armor itself moves to counteract the attack. But here's the detail that makes you appreciate Byzantine engineering: the lacing pattern. Different Byzantine military units used different lacing styles, not just for identification, but because different patterns provided different protective properties. Horizontal lacing was better against arrows. Diagonal lacing provided more flexibility. Some elite units used a complex cross-lacing pattern that was incredibly time-consuming to construct but nearly impossible to penetrate. Yet the mystery remains. Several museum examples of Byzantine lamella showplates with surface decoration, gold inlay, engraved prayers, even microscopic text. Some plates contain Christian prayers in Greek, each letter barely visible to the naked eye. Why would armorers spend hours engraving text on armor plates that would be hidden under cloth coverings? Some historians believe this was spiritual protection, the words themselves providing divine shielding. Others think it was a quality mark, proof that the armor had the skill and patience for truly fine work. And speaking of mysterious spiritual elements in armor, the next suit comes from an empire that literally believed their armor made them invincible through divine power. Armor 6. Aztec Ixcoatepilli and cotton armor. The Aztec Empire, early 16th century. A Spanish conquistador watches in horror as his sword bounces off what appears to be padded cloth worn by an Aztec warrior. He swings again, putting his full strength behind a slash that should cut through fabric like paper. The sword stops dead. The cloth doesn't even tear. This is Ichkahuapili, and it represents one of history's most shocking armor innovations. Full body protection made from cotton that outperformed European steel. Here's the impossible part. Cotton is soft. Cotton is comfortable. Cotton should offer zero protection against weapons. Yet Spanish conquistadors, wearing steel armor in the Mexican heat, quickly discovered that Aztec cotton armor was not only effective, it was in some way superior to their own metal protection. Many conquistadors actually abandoned their steel breastplates in favor of captured Aztec cotton armor. How is this possible? The answer lies in the construction. Ichkahuapili wasn't just cotton fabric. It was cotton fibers soaked in salt brine, then pressed and quilted in multiple layers, creating a process that took weeks. The salt caused the cotton fibers to stiffen as they dried, creating a material more like composite armor than fabric. The finished suit was about 2 inches thick and covered the warrior from neck to mid-thigh. But here's what made it revolutionary. Aztec armorists had discovered something that wouldn't be rediscovered until modern body armor. Layered soft armor can outperform rigid armor against certain threats. When an obsidian-bladed weapon struck Ichkahuapili, the layered cotton would absorb and distribute the impact force, preventing the blade from penetrating while cushioning the wearer from blunt trauma. The armor moved with the body, never restricted movement, and could be cut and reshaped to fit any warrior. And there was more to Aztec armor than just the cotton base. Elite warriors, especially the Jaguar and Eagle Knights, wore additional protective elements. Jaguar warriors wore full-body suits made from actual jaguar pelts over their Ichkahuapili, with the jaguar's head serving as a helmet. Eagle warriors wore feathered costumes with wooden helmets carved to resemble eagle heads. But these weren't just costumes. The thick leather and wooden elements provided additional protection while making the warrior appear larger and more fearsome. Tests with reconstructed Ichkahuapili have produced startling results. The cotton armor can stop obsidian-edged weapons, wooden clubs, and even some metal blades. It's flexible enough to allow full range of motion, including running, climbing, and swimming. And here's the crucial advantage over metal armor. In the tropical Mexican climate, a warrior in cotton armor could fight for hours without heat exhaustion. Spanish soldiers in steel armor were collapsing from heat stroke after 30 minutes of combat. But the Aztecs understood something deeper about armor. They knew that protection wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. Many surviving examples of Ichkahuapili contain feathers from sacred birds woven into the fabric, symbols of gods embroidered into the cotton, or small pouches containing charms and offerings. The Aztec warrior went into battle believing his armor was blessed by the gods themselves, making him not just protected but spiritually invincible. Here's the haunting detail, though. When the Spanish conquest ended, the knowledge of how to properly make Ichkahuapili died with the Aztec Empire. Modern attempts to recreate it using historical descriptions have produced armor that works, but historians suspect we're missing crucial steps in the salt soaking and pressing process. Some believe there were additional treatments, possibly involving plant extracts or special clays, that gave authentic Ichkahuapili properties we can't replicate. And speaking of armor with lost secrets, the next suit comes from warriors who fought in conditions so extreme. Their armor had to protect them from 2 enemies at once. Armor 7. Tibetan Mountain Warrior Armor. The Himalayan mountains, altitude 14,000 feet, 16th century. A Tibetan warrior stands guard at a mountain pass wearing armor made from materials that shouldn't provide any protection at all. His breastplate is made from layers of thick yak leather, hardened through a process involving butter, smoke, and high-altitude cold. His helmet is wrapped leather reinforced with bone. His arm guards are made from bamboo strips and more leather. His facing enemies in steel and iron. He wins. This is Tibetan Mountain Warrior armor, and it proves that the best armor isn't always made from the best materials. It's made from the right materials for the environment. Here's why this matters. Steel armor might stop swords, but at high altitude, weight becomes a weapon against you. Oxygen is scarce. Every pound you carry makes breathing harder. Metal also conducts cold, turning armor into a freezing cage that can cause hypothermia. And if you fall on ice while wearing steel, the weight ensures you're not getting back up. So Tibetan armorists did something brilliant. They abandoned metal almost entirely and built armor from organic materials that could thrive in mountain conditions. The base layer was thick yak wool padding that provided insulation against the cold. Over this went layers of yak leather that had been hardened through a complex process involving boiling in butter, then repeatedly exposing the leather to smoke and freezing temperatures. This created a material that was stiff as wood but light as cloth. But here's where it gets fascinating. The hardened leather was nearly as effective as metal against the weapons common in Himalayan warfare. Swords would bounce off. Arrows would penetrate only an inch or two, not deep enough to cause fatal wounds. The armor was flexible enough to allow climbing and rapid movement at altitude. And crucially, if a warrior fell into a mountain stream or was caught in snow, the leather wouldn't conduct cold the way metal would. Tibetan helmet design was especially clever. Instead of solid metal, they used leather wrapped in overlapping layers around a bamboo frame, creating a structure that was light but could absorb impact. Some helmets featured reinforcement made from bone, yak bone, sometimes human bone from honored ancestors, which Tibetan warriors believed provided spiritual protection as well as physical. But the most ingenious element was the limb protection. Tibetan warriors wore arm and leg guards made from bamboo strips held together with leather cord, creating something like organic articulated plates. The bamboo was flexible enough to bend with the body but strong enough to deflect slashing attacks. And here's the genius part. Bamboo doesn't shatter in cold the way metal can. At high altitude, where temperatures drop below freezing, metal becomes brittle. Bamboo remains flexible. Historical accounts from Chinese sources describe Tibetan mountain warriors as invulnerable to blades and able to climb ice walls while armored. At first, this seemed like exaggeration. But examination of surviving armor pieces has revealed just how advanced the design was. The leather shows a layered construction technique that distributes impact force similar to modern composite armor. The bamboo strips are positioned at angles that deflect strikes away from the body. But here's the mystery that fascinates materials scientists. Analysis of the hardened yak leather from museum pieces shows properties that shouldn't be possible with ancient techniques. The leather has a hardness rating that approaches that of modern plastics, yet it remains somewhat flexible. It's water-resistant despite being organic. Some pieces are over 400 years old and still show these properties. Whatever the exact process was, and we have descriptions, but they're vague, it produced a material we can't fully replicate with modern methods. And there's a spiritual dimension too. Many Tibetan armor pieces contain small compartments sewn into the leather that held Buddhist prayers written on paper, blessed stones, or other sacred objects. Warriors believed their armor was alive with protective spirits. Before battle, they would make offerings to their armor, treating it as a companion rather than just equipment. Yet when you see a picture of Tibetan mountain armor next to European plate armor, your first thought is probably that the European knight would win easily. And in a fair fight on flat ground, maybe. But in the Himalayas, where the Tibetan warrior was designed to fight, the knight would collapse from altitude sickness before drawing his sword. And speaking of armor designed for specific environments, the next suit comes from warriors who fought in perhaps the most brutal conditions of all. Armor 8. Roman Larica segmentata. The Roman Empire, 1st century AD. A legionary bends down to retrieve a fallen shield, then springs back up to thrust his gladius into an enemy's chest. He twists left, blocks a spear with his shoulder armor, then pivots right to support a fellow soldier. Every movement is fluid. Every action is efficient. He's wearing 40 pounds of metal and moving like an athlete. This is Larica segmentata, and it's the armor that conquered the known world. Look at a picture of a Roman legionary and you'll see something that looks almost modern. Curved metal strips forming a segmented breastplate that looks more like science fiction than ancient technology. There's a reason for that. Larica segmentata represents a level of engineering sophistication that wouldn't be matched until the Industrial Revolution. Here's how it worked. Instead of a solid breastplate, the armor consisted of horizontal strips of iron or bronze that were riveted to internal leather straps. This created a flexible torso protection that moved with the body while still providing overlapping coverage. No gaps, no weak points. The strips could slide slightly against each other, allowing the wearer to bend, twist, and reach in ways that solid plate armor would never permit. But the genius was in the manufacturing. Romans had standardized armor production to an extent that wouldn't be seen again until modern assembly lines. Workshops could produce Larica segmentata components in mass quantities. The strips were all standardized sizes. The rivets were interchangeable. If a strip was damaged in battle, it could be replaced with a spare from supply wagons. An armor repair technician, the Roman army had specialized roles for everything, could fix a damaged suit in less than an hour. And here's what made the Roman system truly revolutionary. The armor was designed to work as part of a complete protective system. Larica segmentata protected the torso. The galea, helmet, protected the head with a deep neck guard and cheek plates that deflected downward strikes. The manica protected the sword arm with segmented bands similar to the torso armor. Heavy sandals with hobnailed soles provided traction and foot protection. Each piece was designed to complement the others, creating full-body protection that was less than the sum of its parts in weight but more than the sum of its parts in effectiveness. But here's the fascinating detail that reveals Roman military thinking. The armor was optimized for the Roman fighting style. Romans didn't duel. They didn't have individual warriors showing off. They fought in tight formations where the shield provided frontal protection and the armor protected against flanking attacks and overhead strikes. The segmented design meant a legionary could maintain shield formation while still having full mobility to thrust with his gladius. Tests with reconstructed Larica segmentata have revealed something unexpected. The armor is significantly more effective against downward strikes than horizontal ones. Why? Because Romans typically fought against less organized tribal warriors who would bring weapons down in overhead chops. The horizontal strips were perfectly positioned to deflect these attacks. The armor was literally designed around analysis of how enemies actually fought. And here's the eerie part. Archaeological evidence suggests Romans understood metal fatigue. Some surviving pieces show evidence of having been stress-relieved through heat treatment after initial forging. The metal shows work-hardening patterns that indicate the Romans knew that metal that had been worked would become brittle over time and needed treatment to restore ductility. This is materials science that wouldn't be formally understood until the 20th century. Yet Roman armorists were applying the principles 2,000 years ago. But Larica segmentata has a mystery at its heart. Despite being the iconic armor of the Roman legions, despite appearing on countless monuments and in historical descriptions, it was only used for about 300 years. By the 3rd century AD, it had been largely replaced by simpler mail and scale armor. Why? The traditional answer is that it was too complex to maintain as the empire declined. But some historians now question this. Larica segmentata was easier to repair than mail, easier to produce in standardized fashion, and provided better protection. So why abandon it? Some believe the answer lies in changing tactics. As Rome fought more cavalry-heavy opponents, armor needed to protect against different threats. Others think the standardization itself became a problem. As the empire grew more diverse, trying to maintain centralized armor production became impossible. The truth is, we don't fully know. The armor that conquered the world simply disappeared from use. Its secrets lost for 1,500 years until archaeologists started digging it back up. And speaking of armor that disappeared mysteriously, our final set comes from an empire so powerful that its armor became the template for an entire continent. Armor 9. Carolingian Frankish armor. Francia, the kingdom that would become France and Germany, 9th century AD. A warrior stands before the Holy Roman Emperor, swearing an oath of service. He wears a coat of mail that flows from his shoulders to his knees like a metallic waterfall, each tiny ring interlocked with 4 neighbors in a pattern so complex it would take a master craftsman 6 months to create. Over this goes a breastplate of hardened leather. On his head sits a spangen helm, a helmet constructed from multiple metal segments riveted together to form a perfect dome. This is Carolingian armor, and it represents the bridge between the ancient and medieval worlds. Here's why this armor matters. When the Roman Empire fell, people assumed European armor technology collapsed with it. Medieval knights, according to popular belief, were primitive compared to Roman legionaries. But Carolingian armor proves this is completely wrong. Frankish armorists took Roman techniques, combined them with Germanic innovations, and created something superior to either predecessor. The foundation was the hauberk, a long mail coat that could weigh between 30 and 40 pounds but provided flexible protection for the entire torso and thighs. But this wasn't ordinary mail. Carolingian armors had perfected a technique called riveted mail, where each ring was individually riveted closed after being interlocked with its neighbors. This meant the rings couldn't be pulled apart under stress. Tests with reconstructed riveted mail have shown it can stop arrows, deflect sword strikes, and even provide reasonable protection against early crossbow bolts. But here's where Carolingian armor becomes revolutionary. It was designed for mounted combat in ways Roman armor never was. The long mail coat protected the thighs while riding. The spilt front and back allowed the wearer to sit in a saddle comfortably. The weight distribution meant a warrior could ride for hours without exhaustion. This was armor designed for the new reality of medieval warfare, where cavalry was becoming dominant. And then there's the Spangenhelm, one of history's most underrated helmet designs. Instead of forging a helmet from a single piece of metal, which requires enormous skill and specialized equipment, the Spangenhelm used 4 to 6 metal strips riveted together with triangular or rectangular plates filling the gaps. This distributed construction meant that if the helmet was struck hard enough to dent it, the impact force would be absorbed by the rivets and the junction points between segments, rather than transferring directly to the wearer's skull. It's essentially a primitive crumple zone, like modern cars use. But here's the fascinating detail. Carolingian armor was status-dependent in ways that reveal the entire social structure of the time. A wealthy noble might wear a full hauberk, Spangenhelm, and additional plate reinforcement. A less wealthy warrior might wear a shorter mail shirt and a simpler helmet. A poor foot soldier might have only a padded gambeson and a leather cap. But the key is that all of these approaches were part of a unified system. Everyone knew their role, and everyone's equipment was optimized for that role. The Carolingian Empire understood something crucial. Armor isn't just about the individual warrior. It's about how that warrior fits into the larger military machine. Their armor reflected this. A mounted knight needed different protection than a foot soldier, who needed different protection than an archer. Rather than one best armor, there was optimal armor for each role. And here's where the story gets haunting. When Charlemagne's empire established armor-making standards, it created specifications that would influence European armor design for the next 700 years. The techniques for making riveted mail, the design principles of the Spangenhelm, the idea of role-specific armor, all of these became fundamental to medieval warfare. Yet we have very few surviving examples of actual Carolingian armor. Most of what we know comes from manuscript illustrations, archaeological fragments, and later copies. Why so few survivors? The simple answer is that mail was valuable and recyclable. When a warrior died, his mail would be repaired and given to someone else. When armor was damaged beyond repair, the metal would be melted down and reforged. The very durability and utility that made Carolingian armor effective also ensured few original examples would survive. But there's a deeper mystery. Some manuscript illustrations show Carolingian warriors wearing armor that seems impossibly advanced for the 9th century. Fully articulated arm and leg protection, elaborate helmets with face guards, even what appears to be early plate armor. For years, historians dismissed these as artistic exaggeration. But recent archaeological finds have started to suggest that maybe the illustrations were more accurate than we thought. Maybe Carolingian armor technology was far more sophisticated than the few surviving examples suggest. And that's the ultimate mystery of ancient armor. We have pieces. We have descriptions. We can reconstruct and test. But the full knowledge, the hands-on experience of the master armor, the subtle techniques passed from mentor to apprentice, the small innovations that made the difference between life and death, that knowledge is lost. We're looking at the surviving examples of humanity's attempts to make the human body invincible, but we're seeing them through a dark glass, imperfectly, with crucial details missing. These 9 armor sets, from Parthian cataphracts to Carolingian hauberks, represent 9 different answers to the same question. How do you protect a human being in combat while still allowing them to fight effectively? Each empire, each culture, each group of armors found their own solution based on their materials, their tactics, their enemies, and their environment. And every single one of them succeeded in ways that still impress modern engineers. If you want to see more deep dives into ancient technology and military history, Subscribe and let me know in the comments which civilization's armor you'd most want to wear into battle.